Hello everyone and welcome to the Matchbook Champions League podcast. I'm Phil Kitromilides. We're here to look ahead to the final round of group games in this season's competition, which means it's our last podcast for a couple of months or so, but we're hoping to go out with a bang, as it were, and pick some winners, as well as looking ahead to some really big games for some really big teams. I'm joined as ever by Ian Broadrick Brothers and Mark O'Hare as well. Mark, I can't remember a final round of group games where there were so many big teams, Manchester United, Real Madrid, Inter Milan, PSG, with their qualification riding on the line. It should be a great round of fixtures.
Yeah, it should be. The Champions League gets a lot of kicks, especially the group stage. People say it's boring, it's repetitive. We know what's going to happen, but that's certainly not been the case this time around. It's been fantastic fun. I actually think it's not been the case for a few years, actually. I think the group stage has been quite enjoyable, especially coming into Matchday 6. You want things on the line. We've got plenty on the line this week. We're going to cover 4 or 5 games, and there's a couple more with plenty riding on them too. You know, Atletico Madrid against Salzburg should be a fantastic match as well. So, yeah, it should be a cracking midweek.
Absolutely. Before we get to it, just want to let you guys know that we're doing a content survey on Matchbook. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a couple of minutes to answer a few questions about the content that we're producing, what you'd like to see more of. Be gentle. That's all we ask, but be honest as well. The link is on your screen. If you're listening to us as an audio podcast, the link is in the description of the podcast, but it's matchbook.com/promo/survey. Takes a couple of minutes and it would be much appreciated by us. Okay, now on with the show, and we're kicking off with things in the Spanish capital, Real Madrid against Borussia Mönchengladbach. Real Madrid, who have never not made it out of the group stages of the Champions League. It is in their own hands, but it has come down to the final group game. Win and they're through. Draw and they could even go through as well, depending on what happens in the other game. But these are the odds then. Real Madrid at 1.76 to beat Borussia Mönchengladbach, who themselves are at 5.1 to win in the Spanish capital, and the draw is at 3.84. You can get Real Madrid minus 3/4 goal on the Asian handicap at 1.95. Borussia Mönchengladbach at plus 3/4 goal at 1.93. And the goals line here is over 3, which is available at 1.89, under 3 available at 1.98. These two sides obviously met earlier in the competition in Germany. It finished 2-2. It was a weird game because Real Madrid didn't actually play too badly. Borussia Mönchengladbach took their 2 chances. They were 2-0 up, and then Real Madrid scored twice in the last couple of minutes to salvage a 2-2 draw. Brothers, what's your feeling on this one? I know you watch a lot of German football. Do you think Borussia Mönchengladbach can get a result here and leave Real Madrid out of the Champions League?
Yes, I do. Apologies for that, by the way.
Just go ahead. Just keep going.
God, blimey. Borussia have shown so far in this competition that they have got a fabulous attack, you know, and they're a side that is going to have to score goals to get anything from this game. But they showed.
Are they the top scorers in the competition?
I would have thought.
I think they might be second. If they're not the top, they might be second behind Bayern.
I would have thought after the Shakhtar games, I'd have thought they'd be up there. I mean, in every game so far, they've had 4 or more goals in all the group. So that tells you the sorts of games they get involved with. You know, they're a team that pushes forward. They're not great at the back, but they recognise that, and they bomb forward, and they've got some very good players up front in the likes of Player and Thuram, and they're going to give Real Madrid some problems in this match, as they did in the first game. Obviously, Real Madrid, there's talk about Ramos being fit. You probably have some insight on that, maybe, but.
Well, he didn't play at the weekend in the 1-0 win against Sevilla, and I think Sergio Ramos will play in this game, whatever happens. Yeah, whatever happens, he'll play.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's an expectation that there's sort of talk that he's been back, and he could have possibly played in the last couple of games, but he's just really sort of they're focusing on getting him for this match. So whether or not that's a plus defensively, I'm not sure. I mean,
it is. It is.
I mean, he's a magnificent leader. No, of course, he's a magnificent leader. I think it improves their chances of winning the game significantly, but I don't think it necessarily improves their. Well, it does improve their chances a bit, but they've not been rock solid with Ramos at the back anyway earlier in the season. And I think he's a fabulous leader of men, but I think defensively there's still some question marks at this level for him. But just as he gets older, I know you don't necessarily buy into that, Phil.
Question marks about Sergio Ramos at Champions League level.
Well, no, I'm just talking about defensively. I think he's throwing in some.
We can agree to disagree. That's fine. That's cool. Yeah.
Well, we could talk about his disciplinary record and stuff like that if you like. But in terms of this particular match, I think the slight unknown here is the way that the Inter versus Shakhtar game is going to progress, because clearly, if Inter start winning that game comfortably, the group position and the dynamic changes quite a bit for both teams, because then a draw is fine for both. And although there's obviously some benefit to trying to win the group, if we're 10 minutes to go and they're drawing and Inter are 3 up against Shakhtar, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world for that message to get out onto the pitch and for both teams to settle for that. It's a difficult one to know, because you never really know, and you never know how much emphasis teams are going to place on trying to win a group. I think Borussia, for example, to a certain extent, would just like to get through. I don't think they have ambitions or thoughts that they're going to win the competition, for example. So I think for them, qualifying is everything. Real, on the other hand, possibly have got greater ambitions. So look, I think it's for me, it's a difficult game to weigh up for the fact that the Inter match may have an influence on the tactical makeup in the second half. But I do like goals. I think there's a very strong chance that both teams are going to score here. I think they're both going to show their strength going forward. I know Hazard's still missing for Real, but he's been missing a lot. So it's not like that's something they're not used to dealing with. And I think in general terms, I'd be looking at the goal line. I think over 3. You can get somewhere probably matched around 1.93, 1.95 at the moment, probably. That to me is a stonking bet. I think it's it's a very strong bet that would have come in every single one of Borussia's matches so far, and with everything potentially riding on this. And if Borussia go behind and Inter are winning, they're out, so they're going to have to push. So goals for me.
Okay, I can confirm that Borussia Mönchengladbach are joint top scorers in the competition, along with Barcelona and Bayern Munich. Mark, do you echo Broder's sentiments? I mean, it does look like a really tempting bet, that over 3 goals at around about 1.93, 1.94.
Yeah, annoyingly, he's covered everything I was going to say, actually.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's difficult not to be persuaded and tempted into a goals bangle, but you have to be aware of what's going on in the Inter game, particularly at half time. If Inter are 2-3 goals up at half time, that message is absolutely going to get into the teams of both teams, and they'll know that it's mutually exclusive to play out a draw. I'm not saying they're going to do that, because they're professionals and they're quality players too, and it obviously damage their reputations if they did kind of play out that kind of game. But I do think certainly in play it might be an angle to look towards. You look at Madrid, I was pleasantly surprised and I guess impressed, with their performance against Sevilla at the weekend. It had echoes of the performances they put in towards winning the title at the end of last season. Quite efficient, effective. Probably made a few wrong decisions in the final third when they had opportunities, but they didn't look too troubled by Sevilla at all. But Gladbach absolutely will put them under pressure if they do need to go and get some goals. Brothers has already covered that, but they've scored in all 14 games since the opening day of the season when they lost to Dortmund. They've scored twice or more in all 5 group games, as he says. Over 3.5 has copped in all 5 of them as well, and 10 of their last 12 also. So I think they've kept 3 clean sheets and 15 overall. They are gettable, and I think Madrid, knowing they have to go out and get a result rather than relying on elsewhere, I think they will put the foot down and get a couple of goals themselves. So yeah, I wouldn't put anyone off the over 3 line, but just be aware of the potential for a draw, especially in play.
Okay, so there we go. Everyone's in agreement. Even I know that over 3 goals in this game looks like a really, really good bet. Let's move on and talk about the other game in the same group, because this is one of the tightest groups around. All 4 sides could still make it. The other game sees Inter Milan take on Shakhtar Donetsk. You can get Inter at 1.30 to win the game. Shakhtar available at 10, and the draw is at 6.3. Inter with -1 3/4 goal handicap at just over evens. Shakhtar with +1 3/4 goal start at 1.86, and the goal line is over 3.25, and you can get that at 1.84. Of course, Inter Milan, who last season had the strongest defence in Serie A, but this season they've been conceding plenty of goals as well. They've been scoring a lot in recent weeks. This game finished 0-0 when they met in Ukraine. Shakhtar have only scored against Real Madrid in this season's competition. So what's the move here, Mark?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be with goals again, to be honest. I think the handicap on Inter is far too steep. I know they have to go out and win and get the result, but it's almost dependent as well on what happens elsewhere. Because as we said, if it is a draw in Madrid, then Inter are screwed basically. So, I think they have improved. Had a questionable run of performances and results a couple of weeks back, but since the pressure's been on, I know they put in that wobbly against Madrid in the reverse game at the San Siro a fortnight ago, but they put Sassuolo to bed quite clinically. They were the better team and should have probably beaten Gladbach more comfortably in the away leg last week, and then they put Bologna away quite comfortably as well at the weekend, and Conte fielded pretty much his first 11 at the weekend, bar Martinez. You could probably say Vidal, I know, is a doubt for this game as well, but they are trying to build momentum, and having Lukaku in that team just makes such a difference. In 4 of their last 5, they scored 3 goals or more. I think he's only missed one of those games in the Madrid game. He came off the bench in the other, but they're certainly a different team going forward when he is in the team. You mentioned the game in Ukraine. They were definitely the better team on that day. Very one-sided. Probably should have scored a couple of goals, spurned a few chances. Goalkeeper made a few outstanding saves. Just one of those games when the ball doesn't bounce for you, really. But I do expect them to win the match, but I'm not sure it's going to be as straightforward as the odds suggest. I'm not going to wax lyrical over Shakhtar because I know that's Broadrick's job to do, but we know they're tricky, we know they're pacey, we know they've got threats on the counter-attack. I'd be very surprised if they don't cause into problems. And obviously they've got plenty to play for too. They're coming into the last match day knowing a positive result will see them qualify as well. But Inter have kept 3 clean sheets in 15. They just cannot be trusted to keep Shakhtar out. And 10 of the 15 games that I just mentioned there have reached the 3-goal threshold, which is where the sort of goals bet, the goals angle, the goals line is sitting at the moment. So, yeah, I'd be quite happy to go over that again. It's beaten, we've actually paid out a profit in 3 of Inter's games if you backed overs, the same as Shakhtar in this group as well. So, but I think if we're being logical about it, if there is going to be 4 goals in this game, you're not going to rely on Inter scoring all 4, are you? So I had a little look around, and if you look around the high street, you can get even money on over 2.5 goals and BTTS, which to me makes much more appeal than backing over 3.25 goals or over 3.5 goals. Inter have the potential to cover that line themselves, obviously, but if we're being sort of logical about it, Shakhtar will cause a threat, and I expect them to score too. So, yeah, again, it's kind of dependent on permutations and what's happening elsewhere too. But right now, you expect goals in this game, and I think both teams to score will land as well.
Okay, that market should be available closer to the time as well. Brothers, you are the resident Shakhtar Donetsk fan, possibly one of the few Shakhtar Donetsk fans in Surrey or Southwest London. But yeah, tell us your thoughts on this game.
I take a slightly different approach to this actually from Mark. I think weirdly, you know that I'm a big admirer of Shakhtar, but they've thrown in some absolutely shocking performances in this group, other than literally the
except against Real Madrid.
Exactly. I mean, it's very hard to know what Shakhtar is going to turn up here, because they were awful against Borussia Mönchengladbach for 2 games. They were poor against Inter in the first game, as Mark alluded to. I mean, they really shouldn't have got anything from that, and they were fortunate to come away with a 0-0 draw. And it's one of those matches where I think it's quite hard to be on goals for that reason. In that, sure, I fully trust Shakhtar to score. I know Mark seems quite keen on that, but look, clearly there's every possibility they could. Inter have not been rock solid at the back. I just feel as though Shakhtar have to win this game probably, because I do expect Real Madrid to beat Borussia in the other match. So a draw here is no good for Shakhtar. I feel as though if they are losing and Real Madrid are winning, then there is a good chance that they just ditch it. They're quite a young side, and I feel like they could end up just losing their heads and it all getting a bit much for them. So I think my approach is actually to look at Inter on the handicaps. I still think there's a possibility that the goal line would be fine with Inter in their own right. But I think this is one of those matches where Shakhtar have shown that when it comes to a big match, I'm not sure they're quite emotionally ready for it at the moment, just because of their experience of it. I know they've got some experienced players in the side, but you look at their Europa League semi-final last season against Inter, where they got smashed, and
5-0.
5-0. Well, yeah, that counted smashed. And I'd back Shakhtar to win the Europa League last season. I really fancied them, but again, they just didn't show up.
Who did you back to win the Champions League?
I can't remember. But yeah, so for me, I think the worry here is that they don't show up, and I think of the two bets between goals and handicap, I would favour the handicap slightly. I think you could probably get -1.5 into at around about 1.85 ish, something like that, if you post up. And I think that would be a fair bet. But I like both, but I think that the handicap is the slightly safer way to go. So.
Okay. Diverging opinions then, with Mark suggesting having a look at goals, either over 2.5 and BTTS, or maybe the goal line as well, and Brothers fancying Inter on the handicaps. Okay, let's move on and talk about another fascinating game, which is a straight shootout between Ajax and Atalanta to join Liverpool in the knockout stages from this particular group. You can get Ajax at 2.35, Atalanta at 2.94, with the draw at 4.05. Ajax available at 2.03 if you take them with a minus quarter goal, and Atalanta with a plus quarter goal at 1.85. The goal line is over 3.25 at 1.95. This game finished 2-2 when they played in Italy earlier on in the campaign. Obviously, a draw sees Atalanta through as well. Ajax need to win. Atalanta go through with a win. They go through with a draw as well. We know that 2020 has been a year of unprecedented madness. One of those mad things that has happened in this year is the last 5 Atalanta games have gone under 2.5 goals. I don't know what is going on in the world, but there we go. Usually we're pretty clear on Atalanta means goals, but not necessarily the case, Mark.
No, not recently, but I'm happy to sort of to go against the grain.
Okay, we need to get back to normal, man. Everything needs to get back to normal, and this is one of the things that needs to get back to normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only a very slight positive, but their game at Udinese on Saturday was postponed after a 30-minute delay because of a waterlogged pitch, and they haven't got that 90 minutes in their legs. They still have to make the journey and get back, but it's not going to alter my thinking massively, but it is a slight positive for them. Whereas Ajax were beaten at home by 20. They admitted they had their eyes basically on this game. They conceded 13 shots in the box in that match, and they weren't unlucky at all to lose it, really. And Erik ten Hag, their head coach, was really angry post-match, said the mentality wasn't right, but then at the same time said their focus was on this match as well. So the kind of mixed messages coming out of them. But you kind of compare the two performances that the two teams put in at Anfield earlier in the campaign and feel a little bit sorry for Ajax, who didn't get anything from their trip, whereas Atalanta picked up all 3 points when both teams were really quite open, quite expansive, quite clinical, not clinical, sorry, but quite proactive in their approach, and certainly probably the better team on the night. And I think it's hard to not see this game as being quite open, quite exciting, quite entertaining because of what's at stake here, as well as what happened in the reverse game at Bergamo too, which was an absolute classic, played out 2-2. So obviously both teams are much better in possession, much better going forward than they are defensively. So yeah, I mean, I don't think this game requires a huge amount of sort of forensic detail or analysis, really. It's just a case of what's at stake and how the two teams like to operate, preferably. So yeah, I think if Atalanta score first, Ajax are going to have to throw the kitchen sink at them. And if Ajax score first, Atalanta know they're going to have to get forward as well, because they desperately need a goal too. So as you say, it's basically a shootout between two teams who are better going forward than they are defensively. And I'd almost blindly back this at goals, blindly back goals again in this game, because I think the goal line is 3.25. Yeah, okay, so three's just touching above 1.7, which is probably about the minimum you'd go. So over 3.25 at 1.95 is absolutely fair enough, knowing you only lose half your stake if there is exactly 3 goals. But yeah, really looking forward to this. I think this is possibly the game out of the 4 we're going to discuss in detail, which I'm most looking forward to.
Okay. Brothers, we know how you feel about goals in Atalanta games. Presumably the weird run of low-scoring matches is going to end this week, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think Mark's just said that. I mean, I think it's very hard to see any other outcome than that. I mean, the slight note of caution I'd have is that, when Atalanta went to Liverpool, they set up in a slightly different way tactically. Muriel and Zapata were both dropped to the bench, and they caught Liverpool by surprise in that match. And I think tactically Gasperini was spot on. I mean, Liverpool hardly had a shot, and
because Atalanta need a draw. Like, a draw is good enough for them. So are they going to set up to defend?
Well, no, clearly not. I mean, Gasperini's a of that. But it wouldn't surprise me if they do try and set up a little bit like they did in that Liverpool match.
Right.
And knowing that they've got potentially Muriel Zapata, whoever else to throw in if they need to go full sort of guns blazing. I think one aspect of this match odds that I thought was interesting was actually that Ajax was so heavily favoured. You see the odds on offer. Aside from goals, which I think is a very strong angle, I think you can back Atalanta with a quarter goal start at around about 1.9. Now, if you look at the first match between these two, Atalanta didn't start for the first 20 minutes. I mean, they were all half asleep in the changing room. And, Ajax went out to a 2-goal lead. And then for the rest of the match, Atalanta absolutely murdered them. I mean, they were charging forward. They could have had 5 or 6. And I think it's one of those matches where Atalanta are the better side. And I think we can expect them to approach this positively. And I think getting a quarter goal start at around 1.90 is really good value as well. Because worst case scenario, I expect them to get the draw. They need to qualify, in which case we get a half win. And actually, I think they're going to win the game and potentially win it comfortably, because I just think they're a better side than Ajax.
Okay, there we go. We know what to back in this game then. Goals, and also potentially Atalanta as well. But just stick to the goals. Let's keep it simple. Final game we're going to talk about is a really, really huge one. It's Leipzig against Manchester United. It's another winner-takes-all scenario. Leipzig must win. United can afford to draw. Leipzig available at 2.58 to win. Manchester United at 2.64. The draw is at 3.88. You can get Leipzig on the plus 0 goal start, draw no bet at 1.95. Man United minus 0 goals at 1.96. And the goal line here is over 3, which is available at 1.99. It's another strange scenario whereby both teams could go through, both teams could finish top, both teams could also not go through as well. It's really strange. Are we thinking that Manchester United are going to get the job done, Mark? They seem to be in a really good position in this group, and then it's just gone awry in the last couple of games. Three teams on 9 points as well. Paris Saint-Germain also on 9 points, as well as Manchester United. And Leipzig, PSG are taking on Istanbul Başakşehir in the final game, who have not been particularly impressive, have not won a match. They've got nothing, or they've got nothing to play for, rather. So we can assume PSG are going to win, which means it's a straight shootout between Leipzig and Man United. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, United, where do you start with them? They're so erratic at the moment. It's very difficult to kind of pinpoint how good this team are or how bad they are, because it seems to flitter not just from a game to game, but also 45 minutes to 45 minutes, as we saw at the weekend at West Ham. But their away record
tend to be good against PSG.
They do tend to be good against PSG, and they also tend to be very good against the big teams in the big matches, which is a credit to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, as he's got a set way of playing in these big matches, and it tends to work. I know he made a few changes at West Ham at the weekend, and Bruno Fernandes, we saw his influence when he came onto the field totally changed the complexion of that game, and had this game in mind with playing Fernandes from the start. And but these big games, especially away from home, where he almost sets up in the counter-attacking approach, invites teams onto him, and then plays in transitions. It certainly worked in the reverse game as well at Old Trafford, where Leipzig had all the possession, all the territory, struggled to really make any inroads, and then were caught on the counter-attack, and their high line was completely exposed. So I wouldn't expect Leipzig to make the same mistakes again. They'll also be buoyed by their performance against Bayern Munich at the weekend, when they as well, Nagelsmann admitted post-match that this match was the main one that they were focusing on as well, which was really quite impressive. You can consider their performance for an hour. They were probably the better team. Thrilling game as well. But, United aren't going to be anywhere near as cavalier as Bayern Munich are in terms of how they're going to play out of possession. They're going to sit a lot deeper. They're not going to be caught out in those kind of same transitions that Bayern continuously are in Europe and in the Bundesliga. But, as you mentioned, PSG looked at the games against Man City as well over the past 18 months. United have had a decent edge playing against these teams with their pace, with their attitude, playing on the counter-attack as well. So I do expect them to trouble Leipzig in parts. They've only failed to score twice since February. They've scored in the last 22 away games, 24 if you count the neutral territory games in the Europa League as well. I know there's a few doubts over Cavani and Martial coming into this game after the weekend. They've still got Rashford, Greenwood, Fernandes, Pogba, etc. and so on. And Leipzig are missing Upamecano, who's a massive blow. I know Brothers might disagree with me, but in my opinion, probably the best defender. Willy Orban can come into the team, who's capable. He's certainly not on the same level as Upamecano, though. So, yeah, it's really interestingly set up. I think Leipzig clearly, wouldn't say revenge, but clearly want to show something better than what they did at Old Trafford. They're definitely a better team than that. We saw that at the weekend too. So I'd be very surprised if they didn't land a blow on United. But yeah, you just look at the prices. Before I sort of talk about goals, because I do think goals is the play again, because the goal line, whilst it's very similar to the matches we've already talked about, the odds aren't, and over 2 3/4 is available at 1.76, which is very appealing. But United went off at 2.4 at Old Trafford at home to Leipzig. They're 2.95 in the away game, when a win isn't required from their perspective. So that doesn't sit too right with me, to be honest. I think Leipzig are being slightly underrated. I'm not being sort of drawn into the fact that the permutations require them to win the match, and that's why they should be shorter. But just on a managerial level, I think they're excellent. I think the way they go about their business is superb. You just have to look at their matches against Bayern Munich, not just at the weekend, but in the past 2 seasons even. They've always been a match for them. They're very well capable of picking up a result. So you sort of looked at the draw no bet angle. There possibly is appeal there in Leipzig, but I'd probably prefer to play the goals, just because the goal line at over 2 3/4 at 1.76 is much more appealing than probably the other games we talked about.
Okay, we know that sometimes you're a little bit more cautious than Brothers in terms of odds and angles. Is that an angle that could appeal to you, Brothers? Over 2 3/4 at 1.76, a bit too short?
I think I agree with most of what Mark said. I mean, I think this is a match where Leipzig are likely to have learnt from their mistakes in the first game, but they did make those mistakes, and you have to be so careful with Manchester United in these matches because they are so deadly on the counter-attack. Fernandes has been spectacular since he's come in. I mean, clearly the team needs is going to be important in the sense of, the pace of Martial would be missed, but Greenwood can come in and provide a similar threat, I think, to Martial, or potentially a greater threat with his goal scoring. So I think, Mark summed it up very well. I do think this is going to be a fabulous game. Honestly, I think this, of all the matches, this could be the tensest and the tightest and the most interesting, because I think Leipzig have the ability to hurt Manchester United, and clearly we know Manchester United can do the same. So I like goals. I would go over 3 because that's just the way that I go with these things. At around 2, around even money, I think is good value on that, and I will just sit back and enjoy it and see what falls out. I mean, I've backed Leipzig to qualify from this group, so I mean, I'm hoping Leipzig win, to be honest. But we'll just have to keep up on that front. So.
Okay, I mean, again, broadly speaking, in unison, goals, the angle for this one. Mark, as usual, edging towards the little bit more conservative, over 2.3, over 2.75 goals, rather, at 1.76. And if you can get over 3 around about even money, Brothers fancies that one as well. Okay, before we go, let's get, gentlemen, your best bets of the week. It can be something we've already covered. It can be something else. So, Mark, what is your best bet of the week for Matchday 6 of the Champions League?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Lazio and Club Brugge because it's another game which is, the group permutations effectively make this another shootout as well. So whereas the rest of the games we've covered have got very high goal lines, curiously this one doesn't. I'm not really sure why. Obviously, Lazio are reasonable favourites, around 1.8 to win the game, which is probably quite appealing to many. I certainly will be looking into that game before kickoff as a potential route. But I do think there's going to be goals in this game. Bruges, as well as Lazio, are very decent entertainers, very good going forward. The Belgians have got plenty of pace, trickery, power, and Lazio, when they got Immobile fit and available, Milinkovic-Savic came back and scored a wonderful free kick at the weekend as well. They're very capable of scoring goals themselves, but at the same point, Lazio are not convincing defensively. They played Spezia at the weekend, nowhere near the best, and game state clearly was in their favour. 2 goals up inside half an hour, but they conceded 12 shots inside the box. Spezia fluffed 3 massive chances, hit the woodwork twice, and Lazio have conceded in 13 of the last 14 games across all competitions. So Bruges were nilled home and away by Dortmund, but they absolutely deserved at least a goal, let alone a point in two of those games, particularly the game in Belgium, which they lost 3-0. Incredibly harsh result, and I think they're a very underrated outfit, particularly going forward. So, 6 of the 10 games in this group have featured over 2.5 goals. 6 of the 10 games in this group have featured both sides scoring. All 5 of Lazio's matches have seen BTTS land. 12 of the last 14 have as well. I think a repeat is very much in the offing. In Rome, I think Bruges are going to have to push forward. They know they have to win the game. Lazio can survive with a point or so, but it's just not really their style to sit back and see. So, I think any sort of goals-based bet in Rome is very well placed. I think BTTS around 1.75 probably is the better value than just backing over 2.5 at 1.8. Very marginal in between the two games there, but Lazio should win, but don't expect Bruges to sit down and they'll die trying at least.
Lovely, a beautifully researched pick from a slightly left field match. We love it. That's it. Goals in Lazio against Bruges. Best bet of the week, either BTTS or over 2.5, broadly speaking, at similar prices. What about you, brothers? Best bet of the week?
I will take Real Madrid versus Borussia to have over 3 goals at around about 1.93 to 1.95. I think that is going to be a fabulous game, and looking forward to it.
Okay. So there we go. Over 3 goals in Real Madrid, Borussia Mönchengladbach. Over 3.25, over whatever you like, really, in Ajax against the Atalanta, and over 3 or over 2.25 in the RB Leipzig United game. Those are our consensus selections from the 4 games that we've previewed today. That's it for this week's edition of the Matchbook Champions League podcast. We'll be back when the competition returns in a couple of months' time. Thanks very much for joining us over the last couple of months. It's been a good fun. We'll do it all again starting in February, so make sure you join us then. And in the meantime, make sure you're following Matchbook on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and also on YouTube. Actually, I'm not sure if we're on Instagram, but we're definitely on Facebook and on YouTube as well. Make sure you like us and subscribe. And if you're listening to us just as an audio podcast, thanks very much. And you can subscribe to us on your preferred podcasting app. We'll be back in a couple of months for the resumption of the Champions League. We'll see you then.